My name is Linda Rowan. I was born in a small coastal town called Cedar Bay, Washington, on an April morning when the mist still lingered over the rooftops and the cries of seagulls echoed from the nearby harbor. Just a few minutes later, my sister, actually my twin, Alara Rowan, was born. To most outsiders, we were two peas in a pod. But to my parents, that 5-minute difference felt like an entire world. One was placed at the center, the other always on the sidelines. I felt that from a very early age. Not through words, but through glances, hugs that never came, and favoritism that always tilted toward her. Alara was always the light, and I was the shadow. My mother, her name was Marilyn, often called Alara her sweet moonlight, while I was Linda. Don't bother Mommy when she's tired. Alara got a brand new sea blue bike with a shiny bell. I inherited my aunt's old one. The brakes slipped and the seat was cracked. We took ballet classes at age 6. Alara wore a white dress with glitter, custom made for her. I wore last year's Halloween princess dress, loose and ill-fitting. I used to wonder if maybe I was just too sensitive, that love was actually equally given and I just didn't know how to feel it. Until one day, when I was 7, Alara fell off a seesaw. Just a small scrape, but Mom ran out like the world was ending. She held Alara in her arms, called an ambulance, and talked about it for a whole week to anyone who'd listen. And me? I fell from the apple tree, broke my glasses, scraped my arms, my face covered in mud. My father, his name was Greg, just stood at the window, indifferent. Linda's tough. Let her learn to get up by herself. All I got was a Band-Aid and a reminder, wash your hands before coming inside. I didn't know what a child had to do to be loved equally. I learned not to cry, learned not to need attention, and then I learned to hide my emotions. Because the weaker I appeared, the more I was seen as a burden. That Christmas, Alara received a 3-story dollhouse from Santa. I got a small journal and a pen. My mother said, "I think you're more suited to writing than toys." I smiled and said thank you, out of habit. That night I clutched the journal, not because I loved it, but because I had nothing else to hold. The only person who ever truly saw me as an individual was my grandmother, Grandma Edith. She lived in Idaho and only visited during summer. But every time she came, I felt like I was stepping out of the fog. She asked if I was okay, if I was tired, if I wanted to share anything. She called me brave little Linda, the only name that ever made me feel special. Once, when Alara showed off her silver star necklace, I said nothing. Grandma quietly placed a wooden ring in my hand, engraved with an L on the inside. She said, "It's not shiny, but it's yours. And so are you." Since then, I wore that ring whenever I felt invisible. It reminded me that even if only one person had ever truly seen me, that was enough for me not to disappear. Once, when Alara was showing off her new crystal bracelet, I said nothing. In the dim light of the living room, where the chandelier shimmered above us, I sat still, gripping a cold teacup. My eyes never left that bracelet, the one our grandmother always praised as so elegant. But inside I was silent, as always. Grandma quietly came over and placed a wooden hair clip in my hand, gentle as a loving gesture. My name was carved on the back. "It's not expensive," she whispered, her voice soft but full of warmth. "But it's one of a kind, just like you." Back then, I didn't think much of it. But now, I carry that hair clip with me whenever I feel unseen. Every time someone overlooks me, doesn't hear me, I run my fingers across it like a quiet reminder. It can't replace what I lacked, but at least it reminds me that one person truly saw me, not through the lens of perfection or comparison. My childhood wasn't made of sweet parties or warm family afternoons. It felt more like a journal missing important pages. Each page is a desperate attempt to be noticed, all of them ignored. During those years, I believed that if I was good enough, if I did everything right, attention would come. But I've learned some things that are beyond my control, and I decided I wouldn't let those things define me forever. I discovered my talent for writing in 4th grade when my essay about summer vacation was chosen to be read aloud to the whole school. It was the first time I heard applause, not from my parents, but from classmates and teachers, people who didn't carry quiet comparisons. I stood there, my cheeks flushed, heart racing, scanning the crowd for my mother's eyes. She clapped lightly, still watching Caroline's new dress. Caroline was showing it off to friends, and my mother's gaze never left her. From then on, I wrote more. I wrote to escape Caroline's enormous shadow. I wrote small stories, bottled up emotions. My writing got published in the school newsletter, praised by teachers for being mature beyond her years. But Alara didn't have to do much. She drew a picture of the sun and some trees, and my mother taped it to the fridge, calling it natural talent. I won a county-level storytelling competition. When I told my mom, she just said, "Don't let it go to your head." Every time, I felt the silence in our family. It was the language of neglect, of indifference. Caroline just had to smile to be called charming. But me? I had to win, to do more, just to maybe be noticed, and still be overlooked. Once, at the science fair, I made a simple water filtration model from recycled materials. Caroline made a colorful clay volcano. Even though it didn't work, she was still praised. When the judges gave me second place, I looked for my mother's eyes, but she wasn't there. She was taking pictures of Caroline beside the volcano. "Mommy's little genius," she beamed. That feeling repeated itself, like a wound that never healed. I walked home alone, tucking the award into my coat as it began to rain. My dad, David, was watching the news. I handed him the certificate, hoping for some praise. He glanced at it and nodded. "You're a smart kid. I know you'll be fine." But what I really wanted was for them to say just once, "We see how hard you try." That never happened. Eventually, I realized favoritism doesn't always come with a good reason. It's a choice. And I wasn't the chosen one. But I refused to let that define me. I kept going, waking up early, walking through the snow to school, joining the journalism club, writing for the school website, volunteering at the public library. In the rare moments, I write stories where the forgotten girls always find their voices. One night, while I was editing an article for a national competition, Caroline knocked on my door. "Linda, Mom said I can take the car for Cindy's birthday tomorrow. You don't have any plans, right?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her for a moment and then closed my laptop. She understood that as approval, as usual, I just stepped aside. But I told myself, let her go. And me, I was preparing for a longer journey, one she could not imagine. I knew that one day, the world wouldn't see me as Alara's sister, but as Linda Rowan. And when that day comes, I wouldn't need anyone to acknowledge that. I got into the accounting program at the University of California, Los Angeles. This made me wonder if I had really found the path I truly wanted. But what was even more surprising was that Alara chose the same major. When I heard the news, I froze, as though a wave had crashed over me. I had never seen her show any interest in finance or dry numbers, but Mom just said one simple thing. "This is a good profession. I want both of you to have stability." I was used to such indifferent statements. I didn't respond, just remained silent. On the day of enrollment, Ilara was dropped off at the dorm by our parents. She didn't have to do anything except pick a room. Dad brought all her luggage up to the third floor, where her room was spacious and bright, with sunlight streaming through the window and a view of the pretty garden on campus. Mom silently arranged everything from pillows to a lavender oil diffuser, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. As for me, I registered by myself and came alone. My room was small, damp, only half the size of Ilara's. It was in the basement with peeling paint and no natural light, giving the space a gloomy feeling. I spent almost a week cleaning it up and hanging some old photos of Grandma to ward off the chill. My parents paid all the tuition and living expenses for Ilara. She had a new laptop, a family credit card, and a bank account that always had money every month. She posted pictures of going out for sushi, buying new bags, and attending parties with friends. I had a partial scholarship, and the rest I had to cover myself. I worked as a library assistant in the evening and cleaned classrooms early in the morning. Every day I woke up at 5 a.m. to sweep the 3 floors before heading to class. I had once thought that working as a janitor was something shameful. But then I realized, what's shameful about trying to survive? I also tutored high school students, teaching 3 basic math classes and 2 SAT prep sessions each week. After each class, I rushed back to the dorm to continue studying. Ilara was different. She often sat in the common room, with a face mask on, watching movies and complaining about the academic stress. I knew others might think I was too serious, but I had no choice. I had no safety net, no backup plan. I couldn't afford to fail. One time, when I was mopping the 3rd floor of the business building, I heard Ilara's laughter. She was bragging to a classmate about a party she attended the night before, saying, "I bet my sister is either buried in books somewhere or cleaning classrooms." I didn't say anything, just gripped the mop tighter and continued my work. But I didn't let bitterness consume me. Instead, I spent my free time reading advanced accounting materials, attending seminars, and volunteering to teach Excel to first-year students. One day, when Professor Albert asked about financial reporting standards and no one answered, I raised my hand. He praised me, and after class, he came over and said, "Linda, you have the potential for auditing. I'd like to recommend you for a winter internship at my company. What do you think?" I couldn't say anything, my mind spinning from disbelief. That evening, I called home to share the good news. Mom didn't seem excited at all. Her congratulations were short, just a polite comment. "That's good." Ilara signed up for a therapeutic yoga class, saying it was good for mental health. I didn't say anything, just remained silent. I didn't blame them anymore. I just felt relieved because I finally understood that their recognition wasn't necessary for my success. While Ilara drove her new car to school, I rode my old bike to the grocery store. When she talked about a summer vacation in Miami with her friends, I spent my break working on a report for Professor Albert. I didn't have glamorous parties or exciting videos, but I had something she didn't: control over my own life. And I began to believe that, maybe because no one paved the way for me, I had to learn how to build my own path. A path that might be bumpy, but it was mine. I started my 5th semester with a strong determination. I learned how to make the most of every free minute, every small opportunity. While Ilara spent her time choosing outfits for the school's spring festival, I was still buried in the library, studying international financial reporting standards. I knew that I had no one to support me, so I couldn't afford to waste any chance. One Friday afternoon, I went to Professor Albert's office to submit my financial analysis paper. Just as I was about to leave, he called me back. Linda, I have a friend at a regional auditing firm. They're looking for summer interns. Would you like me to put your name down? I stood still, speechless. I'd love that, Professor. He nodded. Then send me your resume and transcript before Monday. As I walked out of his office, my heart was filled with hope. For the first time, someone had opened the door for me without me having to knock first. And then, one evening, when I called home to share another piece of good news, Mom just said softly, "Congratulations. Sounds important." Her voice didn't have the slightest emotion, and I knew. I no longer expected anything. I flew to Chicago by myself, wearing the square-neck black dress I had saved up for so long to buy. Even though I had no one with me, I still felt like I was walking on my own path. After I shared the news, Mom just replied in a barely audible voice, "Oh, congratulations. Sounds important." Then, as if to escape something, she called out to the living room, "Greg." I heard her mention something about a scholarship, Dad replied, his voice blending with the chaotic sound of the sports program playing on the TV. "Yeah, she's always been the smart one. We knew she'd be fine." I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Maybe just one simple sentence. "Mom is proud of you." But she didn't say that. I ended the call with my usual politeness, though inside I felt myself growing colder by the second. "If possible, I'd really love for you and Dad to come. But if you're busy, it's okay. I'll check the schedule again," I said. Her voice replied as if we were talking about going to a weekend farmer's market. "Okay, let me take another look." I hung up. The phone screen went dark, reflecting a faint, blurred version of my own face. The room suddenly felt too large, and the silence too loud. In that stillness, a part of me cracked. Not because they didn't care, but because I still hoped they might. I thought I had grown past it, let go of the need to be seen. But it turns out, deep down, that little girl still stood in the corner, looking up, waiting for a glimpse of approval from her parents. I flew alone to Chicago. The black square-neck dress, something I'd spent a month working extra shifts to afford, was carefully folded in my suitcase. Running through my mind was a list of things I knew I wouldn't hear tonight. The award ceremony was held at the Grand Marlowe Conference Center, a tall glass building rising in the heart of the city, reflecting light as if it had never known darkness. I walked into the grand hall with its soaring ceilings and floating chandeliers, like hundreds of frozen dreams suspended midair. Everyone was dressed in their finest, smiles bright, voices calling out to one another across the room. I stood quietly at the registration table, wrote my name, and placed a dash in the guest box. It felt like signing a declaration. No one is coming with me. When the program began, the lights dimmed in the auditorium, and the stage lights came on. One by one, the host introduced each student. Their accomplishments, shining and magnified, were wrapped in the pride of loved ones watching from below. Then it was my turn. "Linda Rowan, Columbia State University," the host's voice echoed through the rows. "A testament to self-made determination. She has overcome adversity, earned scholarships, worked part-time jobs, interned at prestigious firms, and completed advanced coursework." I walked onto the stage as applause rippled around me. Under the bright lights, I couldn't make out anyone's face, only the shimmer from the third row on the left, the spot where my parents would have sat if things had been different. But those seats were empty. I kept my smile steady, shook hands with the foundation director, and posed for a photo. When the flash went off, I turned away, my eyes no longer searching. Exiting the stage, I slipped out through the side door. The Chicago air was freezing, but somehow easier to breathe than the room filled with chatter and laughter. I took out my phone and called the only person I wanted to share the moment with. Grandma. Linda, is that you? Her voice was as warm as a late spring sun. I've followed every step you've taken. You did it. I broke down, tears falling like they carried years of being overlooked. Grandma, I wish you were here with me. I'm always here, in every heartbeat of yours. And don't ever let those who fail to see you dim your light. You stood tall, on your own, and that's the most wonderful thing. I nodded, as if she were right there beside me beneath the freezing sky. Back in my room, I opened a small envelope in my wallet, a handwritten letter from the foundation director. Linda, we chose you not only for your academic excellence, but because your life journey is truly inspiring. The big door is open now. Don't be afraid to walk through. I smiled. I didn't need my parents to lead the way, and for the first time, I didn't need them to shine. The big door is open now. Don't hesitate to walk through. I smiled, not to reassure myself, but like a farewell to the shadow of the past that always craved recognition. I no longer needed my parents to pave the road. And now, I didn't need them as a backdrop to shine either. The Weston G. Brandt Award ceremony was held at the Grand Marlowe Conference Center, a magnificent 12-story glass structure in the heart of Chicago, a cold and solid symbol of success. As I pushed through the revolving glass door, a gust of wind brushed my collar, making me shiver, as if the city was testing whether I deserved to be there. The grand hall unfolded before me, drenched in light and perfection, calculated to the last detail. A red carpet stretched from the entrance. Silver-trimmed white flower arrangements stood with ceremony at each podium corner. Crystal chandeliers hung high above, casting countless glimmers over the dazzling gowns of the students. And I, wearing a simple black dress and a fraying clutch, felt like a quiet pause in an otherwise grand symphony. It felt like I had stepped into another reality, a glittering world I once thought only existed on magazine covers, where people like me were only ever allowed to watch from the sidelines. I arrived early and chose a seat near the back of the auditorium. The closer I was to the shadows, the safer I felt. From there, I watched. As the lights softened and the ceremony began, I clasped my hands in my lap. The host stepped onto the stage, his voice warm and steady, every word carrying through the mic, introducing each outstanding student, each achievement worthy of the room's admiration. One had developed an accounting app for small businesses. Another had won an international award in financial risk analysis. I clapped for each of them, not out of politeness, but because I understood. I understood the price of every sleepless night, every rejected scholarship application, every silent fall no one ever saw. Then my name was called. Linda Roswin, an outstanding student of Columbia State University. The host's voice was warm and formal. She earned her own scholarships, paid her own tuition, sought out her own internships, and constantly worked to grow. Strength isn't always given. It's sometimes forged from what's most lacking. The applause rolled like a wave. I walked onto the stage. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I didn't look into the crowd. I didn't need to anymore. I accepted my certificate, shook hands with the foundation director, and held a smile that was measured, not forced, but not fully whole either. As I turned for the photo, my eyes instinctively glanced to the left side of the hall. I froze. Linda. She was there, in a deep red dress, eyes wide with surprise. Beside her, my parents. Dad looked at me as though trying to solve an equation he couldn't comprehend. Mom sat straight, lips tightly pressed, her eyes like a closed door. Unclear if what lay behind was anger or guilt. I didn't know how they got there. I hadn't confirmed anything on the phone. Maybe Alara brought them as a surprise, or as a test. When the camera flashed, I turned away. No nod, no smile. I didn't need a photo to remember an uncomfortable moment. After the ceremony, recruiters spread through the hall, representatives from renowned accounting firms, sharp-eyed executives with trained smiles. They shook hands, passed out business cards, and made conversation. I stood there, name tag in hand, in the middle of the crowd and the light. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to hold on to anyone, because I was already here, alone, but complete. A woman in a teal suit with sharp tailoring walked toward me, her polite smile doing nothing to hide her confidence. She extended her hand. "I'm Lola Parks, Director of Recruitment at Everin & Company. We were very impressed with your profile, Linda. If you're interested, I'd love to invite you to our headquarters in Manhattan to discuss a full-time position after graduation." I nodded gently, as if my body had responded before my mind could catch up. I accepted the business card with both hands, bowing slightly. "Thank you very much." I heard my own voice, quiet but clear, for the first time, not needing anyone to shield it. Manhattan. That glass tower I once gazed up at from silent dreams. Dreams that belonged to me alone, unknown and unshared. Just as I was about to turn away, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. A sound both familiar and strange. It was my mother. She was walking quickly toward me, her eyes unsettled, wavering between worry and something I had never seen in all my 22 years. Shyness. "Linda." My mother's voice was hoarse. "I didn't expect the ceremony to be this big. I didn't know you had achieved so much." I stood tall, keeping my voice steady. "Because you never asked." The air froze at that moment. Alara stood behind, her eyes darting between me and our mother. Then my father spoke, stammering as if struggling through an unprepared speech. You really are something special. But why didn't you tell us? If we had known, we could have supported you." I gave a faint smile. Not mocking, just the smile of someone who had finally stopped waiting to be rescued. I had once longed for them to see me, truly see me, for so many years that I'd forgotten I could walk without their gaze. I turned away, walking toward the recruitment area, where glossy, cold, anonymous doors held a promise. The opportunity was mine to claim, not theirs to grant or take away. For the first time in my life, I didn't need validation. For the first time, they saw who I was, and I no longer needed them to. That night, I returned to the hotel alone. Chicago was windless, but the cold still cut into my skin, reminding me that I was still here, in flesh and blood. I looked at myself in the mirror. The face staring back wasn't glowing, wasn't tired, just calm. I used to think this moment would make me cry, leave me empty, aching, regretful, but it didn't. I felt nothing. A complete silence, not a hollow kind of emptiness, but a stillness, like the surface of a lake after a storm. I had waited my whole life for something that never came, and now I have finally let it go. The next morning, as I was folding my shirt into my suitcase, my phone vibrated. It was Alara. I hesitated a second before picking up. "Where are you?" Her voice was softer than usual. "Hotel, about to head to the airport. Can I see you for a bit?" I was silent. Part of me wanted to say no and leave without looking back. But then another part, the one that had lived quietly in Alara's shadow all my life, whispered, "Let her speak." 30 minutes later, Alara knocked on the door. No makeup, no dress, just an old hoodie and jeans. She stood at the door for a long time before stepping in. "I don't know where to start," she said, her eyes slightly red. "Last night, watching you step on that stage, I realized I never really knew you. I sat on the edge of the bed. My heart wasn't racing like I'd imagined. Alara sat across from me, her eyes no longer held that confident sparkle. I always thought I was the one under pressure, she said. But now Mom and Dad are telling me I need to be more independent. They're using you as an example. I know it's the right thing, but I feel like I'm being compared. I raised my eyebrows. Strange. How familiar that felt. I had lived with that feeling nearly all my life. Alara lowered her head. Did you ever wish I didn't exist? I didn't answer right away. I thought of the afternoons I cleaned the classroom alone, the instant noodles I ate while she was out partying, the A's buried deep in drawers. Finally, I spoke, softly. No. I just wanted to be seen. Alara blinked. I'm jealous of you, Linda. Jealous because you're smart and strong without needing anyone. I used to think you were cold. Now I understand. You were just tired. From being strong for too long. I turned away. My heart no longer stirred. If it had been a year ago, I might have burst into tears. But now it felt like hearing an old song, too familiar to move me. Alara, I said gently but firmly. Back then, I wanted an apology. I wanted Mom and Dad to acknowledge me just once. But last night, I realized I've come too far to need that anymore. She looked at me for a long time and asked, So, are we still sisters? I answered, voice unwavering. I don't know. Maybe it'll take time to understand that being sisters isn't just about shared blood. It's choosing to stand by each other, even when no one else does. When Alara left the room, I exhaled like I'd set down an invisible suitcase. I didn't need belated hugs or regretful glances. I had given myself what I needed most, freedom. I moved to New York on a gray, rainy day, the mist-like rain brushing the skyscrapers. The city didn't open its arms, but I hadn't come to be welcomed. I came to begin. Everin and Company was on the 37th floor, among neon lights and sparkling glass windows. At first, I was lost in deadlines, meetings, and emails. Among people who had been there long before me, maybe no one remembered my name. But I wasn't afraid. I was used to standing on my own in a world no one prepared for me. Every morning, I wake up at 5:30, brew a cup of black coffee, put on my headphones, and join the flow of people on the subway. In the city that never sleeps, where everyone is chasing power, money, and fame, I chase only one thing, the freedom to live true to myself. My tiny apartment on the Upper West Side, a quiet corner in the heart of a city that never rests, was all I could afford at the time. One bedroom with off-white walls, a compact living space that doubled as a kitchen, with a second-hand gray sofa, and a single window facing the weathered brick wall of the neighboring building. No balcony, no scenic view to dream of. But in that stillness, I found something I never knew how to protect before, inner peace. My mother would call sometimes, usually on weekend afternoons. The conversations were short, like a social formality. Are you eating well? Yeah, I'm fine. Is work tiring you out? A lot, but I'm used to it. Then, always an update about Alara. She's thinking about getting another certification. I told her she should follow her sister's path. I would simply say, no blame, no expectations. Between us now was a polite distance, like two old acquaintances keeping manners, though no longer belonging to each other. Alara texted me a few times, sent pictures, said she'd attended a finance seminar, that she was applying to a consulting firm. Her messages no longer boasted. They seemed reserved, as if she was starting to realize the world no longer bends for her. I didn't hate those texts, but I didn't feel the need to reply either. I had already stepped out of that orbit. In New York, I lived to my own rhythm. After work, I took an advanced financial data analysis class in an old building near Columbus Circle. On weekends, I'd visit a used bookstore on 84th Street, where the shopkeeper still remembered my name, pick a novel, then sit by the window reading for hours as if the outside world didn't exist. One chilly afternoon, while reading The Bell Jar, I received an email from the project director. They wanted me to lead the audit team for a new client. I sat still for a long time after reading it. 3 years ago, I was mopping classroom floors at night to afford tuition. Now, I was preparing to lead an audit team for a multi-million-dollar firm. That evening, when I got home, I opened the small window and looked up at the city lights in the night sky. New York never sleeps and never waits for anyone. But I had caught up. I knew I was living the life that little girl once dreamed of, even if no one believed she could. A week later, my mother called. "Linda, are you coming home for Thanksgiving?" I glanced at my calendar. That week, I was scheduled to present the audit results to the board. "No, I have a big project." She paused for a second. "Okay, sweetheart." Her voice softened, then she hung up faster than usual. I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved, because for the first time I chose myself, my dream, and my path, not the role others scripted for me. Family is now a fading memory. Not because I gave up, but because I stopped chasing. At the end of my first year at Everett and Company, I was promoted to associate. Not a big leap by others' standards, but to me, it was a milestone. I was no longer the girl struggling to survive. I was building a future. I started saving, not for handbags or vacations, but for something more precious: the power of choice. The freedom to switch paths anytime, pursue an MBA, move into analytics, or start a business without needing permission. I also began opening up, in my own way. I joined a mentoring group for senior accounting students, things I once wished I had. Once a month, I'd sit with young faces and share the bumpy journey, the long nights, silent failures, and moments when I almost broke. One student asked, "Do you ever feel sad your family didn't support you?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window. The Hudson River shimmered in the golden sunset. "Yes," I said, "but I realized this. If you keep waiting for others to fill your cup, you'll always be thirsty. I chose to fill mine myself." I used to live hoping to be seen. Now I live so I won't regret it. Alara still texts. Her tone has changed. No longer arrogant, no longer competitive. She wrote that she found a job in our hometown and planned to study project management. One time she wrote, "I'm not where you are yet, but I understand why you're strong. I'm learning that." I didn't reply. But something inside me softened. Not because she finally acknowledged me, but because I no longer needed to win. Sometimes, when you stop competing, that's when you truly win. I still get the occasional call from Mom. Now they don't feel like obligations. Some days she tells me about her roses blooming, or a new cake recipe she learned from her social group. She no longer asks about work, not because she doesn't care, but because I no longer need that from her. Sometimes I wonder, what if things had been different? What if love had been shared equally? What if I hadn't been labeled the one who can manage alone? Would I still be strong? I don't know, and maybe I don't need to know anymore. One Saturday afternoon, I passed through Bryant Park and saw two sisters playing tag. The older one slowed down so the younger could catch up. When they fell on the grass, they burst out laughing. My heart ached, not from envy, but because I had learned to let go of the desire to live that way. It took me years to understand. Not everyone born with you will be your support. but that taught me to choose the people who become my family. Coworkers, students, those who believe in me unconditionally. I built my own home, not from blood, but from respect and genuine connection. In that world, I'm not the extra. I don't have to be great to be heard. I just have to be myself, and that's enough. Every morning, as I step off the subway, the morning sun brushing against the hem of my jacket, I don't need anyone to remind me that I'm on the right track. The city's sidewalks whisper it to me with every step. My third fall in New York passed between rain and sunshine and the work cycle. I had just completed the most complex audit for a global real estate corporation. The results exceeded expectations. My immediate supervisor recommended me for the position of senior associate. No party, no fireworks. Just a quiet evening. Put the laptop down on the kitchen table, turn on the kettle, and smile to myself. I don't need applause. I know I did it. Alara sends cards every now and then. Birthdays, Christmases, or just thinking of you. She lives in Seattle now, working for a fintech startup. The notes are more heartfelt, and I've learned to respond. Not too close, not too far. My relationship with my parents remains distant. My mother still called occasionally, whenever Caroline did something she was proud of. A published article, a successful launch. But the calls grew less frequent, as if we were just keeping up a rhythm, devoid of emotion. The questions became mechanical. How's work? Or, is it snowing in New York yet? I responded with answers that were adequate, without bitterness, without blame. No more trying to patch up something that had long been torn. One time, Mom texted, "Honey, I still think if we had talked more that day, things might have been different." I read the text in the dim light of the familiar coffee shop, amid the laughter and the strong smell of espresso. But I didn't reply, because the what-ifs no longer mattered to me. I had lived through all those possibilities, the pain, the hope, and then the letting go. That spring, I was invited to be the keynote speaker at a major Women in Finance conference. The city that day was bathed in the soft light of April sunshine, and outside the conference center, a long line of women of all ages stretched along the sidewalk. They came not just to hear a story of success, but to see a part of themselves reflected in the journey I was about to share. Standing on stage, in front of hundreds of quiet, expectant eyes, I spoke about myself, without glamour, without editing. I talked about the girl who used to clean dormitory hallways at 5 a.m., who washed mugs at the library just to afford textbooks, and who studied alone on rainy nights because no one ever told her she was allowed to dream. We don't need anyone else to validate our worth, I said near the end. We affirm it with every small action, with every time we rise after falling, and every time we choose ourselves instead of pleasing others. When I stepped down, my heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from a strange, unfamiliar feeling, being heard. An older woman approached and held my hand, her eyes glistening with something deeply sincere. "Thank you for saying the things we've never dared to admit," she whispered. "That a lack of family support doesn't make us weaker. It forges a kind of strength we never expected." I nodded. No words could fully express the gratitude I felt in that moment. That night, I walked alone across the Brooklyn Bridge. The wind brushed through my hair, and the city lights shimmered on the water like shards of golden glass. Everything was still loud, still unrelenting, but within me, a quietness bloomed, a peace that only comes after accepting what cannot be changed. It took me years to understand this. Blood doesn't guarantee love. Family is not just where we're born, but where someone truly wants to see us grow. And sometimes, that place isn't the house we grew up in, but the connections we choose to keep. The people who walk with us, believe in us, and most importantly, ourselves. I no longer resent my family, truly. They lived and loved within their limits. But I also learned that I have the right to reject love that exists only in name, without heart. I choose to love myself. The girl who once sat by her dorm window, breaking a cheap cookie into pieces to celebrate a scholarship, is now a woman who knows her worth, standing firmly on her own feet, needing no guide. I don't live to be acknowledged. I live so I never betray myself. And in that, Linda Roswin is no longer just the girl who could handle things. She is someone who rewrites the meaning of worth, family, and love based on what she has lived, not what she was taught or expected to be. Looking back, I don't regret those quiet years. They shaped me, not perfect, but real. And for me, that's enough. Charlotte's story is not one of revenge, but of choice. The choice to walk away, to love herself, and to leave behind what no longer fits. In a world that constantly demands we please others, choosing to live truthfully may just be the bravest act. What do you think of Charlotte's choice? Was she too harsh, or was it the only way to truly find herself? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow for more stories about growth, family, and the journey to selfhood.